morning. Welcome back to another episode of whatever we feel like talking about. But this morning, I'm really excited because during our brain stew session, we started chatting about kind of this comparison between what we all know to be the gold standard, right? Which is that 3-ring model of ag education. And we started chatting for a few minutes about what does that gold standard look like if we were to take that model and then apply it to our personal lives, right? What would the 3 rings be? And then the bigger question, I think the fire starting question is, of those 3 rings, based on whichever one you think maybe should have some priority, a little more importance, more significance, is that where you're actually dedicating the majority of your time, effort, and energy? Dare I say, probably not. So with that, welcome back. I'm Coach Colleen. This is Coach Cory. Cory, let's start with the 3-ring model of ag education. We've got classroom, SAE, and FFA. What are your thoughts when you think back to, being in teaching mode? Obviously they interconnect. We're taught to believe that they are all of equal importance. I'm not saying they're not, but what are your thoughts there? Do you shift one direction or another? What's that look like?
Going through Fresno State, I had those 3 things drilled into my head, I felt like. And
Yeah.
it was always that same conversation of all 3 of these things are just as important, and all 3 of these things you not necessarily need to be good at, but need to be heavily involved with. At least that was my interpretation of it. So, as I got into student teaching, I started to, my main focus was the classroom portion because student teacher, ag teacher, not throwing shade, but teacher is part of your title. Uh, so the classroom portion was my main focus. I didn't do FFA in high school. I didn't know really much about SAE, even though I did actually was involved with like SAE type projects when I was a kid. I did Grange, not 4-H,
Mhm.
and I didn't go to a high school with FFA, so I didn't really
Oh,
have the luxury of getting to understand what that was all about. I thought it was just showing animals, which that was more of the SAE thing than anything. Um, so, the classroom piece was always what stuck out to me more. And then once I got my first full-time teaching job and 2 years in, I'm like, okay, classroom is by far number one, like second to none. If
mhm.
I'm not a good teacher, I have no business even being in this profession, honestly. Um, the FFA part was fun. The meetings are cool. I feel like it was fun to go to events and get students involved in speaking contests and CDE competitions, stuff like that. That was cool. That was more of the gamey part for me. And then SAE was by far like my third. I Showing animals was one thing as a kid.
Yeah.
Having to be an advisor for animals like dairy heifers, I fucking hated it. I hated every minute of it. And if I had stayed at the high school level, I would have found a way to get out of it
Mm.
because I was done. It's just for me, the parent involvement on some of those things really bothers me.
Mm.
Like the parents are trying to live vicariously through their kids, especially sometimes, and this can piss some people off, but in the dairy heifer world, like you got parents fitting their kids cattle,
Yeah.
and I don't know how to do a top line. So
Mhm.
I'm like, all right, kids, you're up. And they screw it all up. I'm like, well, at least it's yours, versus some of these heifers that walk into the ring and they're just dialed in. It's like, yeah, but your dad did it.
Yeah.
So, anyways, that part pissed me off, which is why I guess I never bought into that.
Mm.
And record books was not my thing. I was a motivator to get kids involved in record books, and then I would feed them to my friend Julie Luxon, who is like a record book guru.
Yes.
That's a shout out, Julie. Hope you're watching. But that was what was helping me doing my part for the SAE. But coming full circle here, no pun intended, the classroom portion was always my biggest focus. And I remember going to new professionals. I think it was my first or second year, and a good friend of yours who I'm not going to give a shout out to because I don't know her that well, so I don't want to be a make it weird here. But she did a speaking engagement for all of the teachers, not just like a small workshop. It was for everybody in the room. And she talked about the three ring circle and how classroom should be the most important. And I
Mm,
think that there's a lot of student teachers or young teachers who get into this profession because they love the FFA portion or they love the SAE portion. That's kind of the engaging factor, but you can't forget that you're a teacher. If you become a packet teacher, you're not teaching anything. And that's the biggest problem with the school system in general is how many teachers are actually engaging their students. Like, especially on the ag side of things, like you're teaching them to critical think. You're teaching them a skill. You're helping them get jobs. Like that is so important and such a huge responsibility. Don't take that for granted. Like that is your primary focus or should be.
mhm, mhm. No, I like that you say that too. And I think I do agree. I think when you get to a certain, I mean, the belief is always there, right? Generally speaking, should you have a balance of all three? Absolutely. Are you going to be able to build a program? Are you going to be able to build a sustainable program or a program that can evolve and grow and expand over time by focusing on just one area? Absolutely not. But I will say that I agree, classroom, especially when you're starting, has to be the focus. And for me, I think I think it was always the focus because I didn't always have the choice of getting to be the advisor in charge of the SAE projects I actually had experience in, right? Like I was voluntold. My first teaching position at Lodi when I got Lodi #1 when I got hired. Um, the person that left had been in charge of turkeys and rabbits. So guess what I got to be in charge of? Turkeys and rabbits. Okay. Did I know
Nope.
my head from my tush? Absolutely not. Did I know what to do when we lost a whole bunch of rabbits due to heat issues over the summer? Kids not doing what they're supposed to do, kids not calling me when they needed help? No. So I became friends with the serpentarium in town real freaking quick. Um, we donated a lot of rabbits to some very big snakes. Um, but you don't always have choice in those areas, right? And I raised market hogs all 4 years in high school. I didn't have a super diversified experience, but I was a city kid. So that was a pretty big deal in and of itself. When I came into ag teaching, it was very much because there was still that rah pull in the FFA piece because that's a lot of times I think it's where you see kids finally figure out like, ooh, there's some stuff I might be real good at, right? Or, ooh, this is really fun, or that trip was really cool, or jamming out, singing those songs, during the van ride, like that was really memorable. But the classroom was always, for me, like focus #1, because you get to see every kid. You get to have an influence potentially on every single kid. You get to, use agriculture and the industry as the lens that you're speaking through and teaching through. And for how many kids, especially today, have never heard some of that stuff, have never had a positive experience with that content and with the history of our industry. So that was always my focus because I thought, hey, if I could be, and even outside my teaching strategies, like if I could just be the one positive person, the one person looking for solutions in their day, the one person welcoming them through the door and like excited about whatever they're going to contribute, I really believe that would make the difference. And to a certain extent, I know that it did. I think classroom has to be #1. As you were talking, I had an idea, and I'm not sure what you would think about this. You might agree, you might disagree. But the thought was, in general, I agree there should be a balance. I also believe classroom should be like your first priority, especially when you're starting. If you're not good and effective in the classroom, you have no business. I don't care if were the supreme champion when you were in high school. You don't need to be in charge of those projects until you get your shit right in the classroom. But beyond that, I think the importance or your balance can get a little more flexible or needs to be flexible depending on the time of the year. And here was my thought behind it. When it's back to school time, August, September, your focus should be in the classroom and lighting these kids up, getting them excited, getting their brains turned back on, right? Hopefully igniting some interest and some joy into ag education. As we shift through the calendar year, and I'm speaking from my experience primarily in the Sacramento section, based on our schedule, it could be different other places. We get towards like fall and winter time, heavy focus on agri-science, right? Like you're starting your projects, you're doing the research, starting to get some data coming in, teaching kids how to analyze data, like all the stuff. Right before Christmas break, we would have our local agri-science fair. Multiple class periods of kids writing papers, putting boards together, putting displays together so we can invite, parents and community members to come in and see the stuff. That was a focus. I wasn't necessarily focused on whoever were going to be my rabbit kids or my egg kids or whatever for fair. I'm focusing on agri-science then. It doesn't mean the classroom's not important. It doesn't mean FFA is not important, but I'm focusing on that population at that time because it has to get done. And then, as we've talked before, you start shifting into springtime. All of a sudden, I think it's easy, not that you should, I think it's easy to start shifting away from your focus in the classroom because we have the pressures of state degree applications, proficiency applications, SLE applications and students attending, MFE and ALA conferences, CDE teams, and, career development events on the weekends. It's like, this stuff starts happening and all of a sudden you're like, okay, I have to give all of myself to this team during this practice so that I can hopefully prepare them to perform well at this contest, that contest, because the goal is that they wind up at state finals and do some stuff, right? Whew. I got excited and I'm stressed out just talking about it. I don't even have to do that shit anymore. You know what I mean? So it's like, we're talking about this 3-ring model, and yes, it should be balanced. How do you do that? And then depending on who you work with or the way that your department's structured, how you kind of delegate responsibilities, I think it makes a big difference of where your focus goes, and how sustainable it is throughout the course of an entire year.
We've talked about this before, but sometimes people are getting spread too thin. Like, you can't be great at all of them. I think somebody had told me at one point, and maybe this was just something I had in my head, that you pick 2, and try and get good at 2. Like an ag mechanics teacher, for example, like especially on the fabrication side of things, their job is to get students building projects, for a dinner dance or for these fundraiser type things. And more importantly, for student like retention in a way, like getting students, helping them build a skill set and watching them, start from ground zero and helping them create this game plan to build this really cool project. Like Daryl Herschler, one of my great mentors, like, think the world of the dude. I student taught under him, and I made an point to student teach under him. He was great at that. That was like, that dude pumped out projects all the time, and then he just knew what he was doing. He's just a stud. And to have a guy like him who can focus and put so much time and effort into the shop, to ask him, and not, I'm sure at some point in his career he was probably asked to do that, but to have him be an animal advisor is doing a disservice to that program and those students that are involved in it, because that time he could be spending with them, the extra time he could be putting into them and energy he could be putting into them, that's being taken away, and he's having to put that into something that he's maybe not necessarily passionate about, And so that, I go back to the dairy heifer thing. For me, I didn't give a shit about dairy heifers. I didn't know anything about them, didn't really care about them that much. I cared enough because the kids cared.
Yeah.
But it really was hard to like actually get pumped up. Like, yeah, we got dairy heifer like showmanship practice today. I don't know what the fuck I was doing, And then these hardcore parents come in and they know that Corey doesn't know what the fuck he's doing. So now they're frustrated. It's like, oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, you got to win this district fair, right? Like,
or then you're always compared to the other advisors that, and I'll be honest, I will always say, like, whoo, I got to work for a few years with Sierra Myers, who like now she's teaching at the collegiate level. She's in charge of a judging team. Like it's her jam. Would I ever put myself like in the same realm of what she's able to do in terms of not just like showing herself, but the livestock judging component, being able to convey that level of information to students? No. Was I still responsible for hosting showmanship practices on our very large, like on campus school farm? Yes, I was. I loved the opportunity to get to connect with the kids, and I was able to, like, for the ones who didn't have necessarily the same ambitions as maybe some other students with FAIR, we were able to commiserate and just be like, hey, let's work on a few key things. All right. You don't have to wind up being like the world's greatest showman. Life will still go on. But it was important for the kids to know that like we had a go-to person like that. Sometimes it was difficult though, being the advisor on call and always feeling like, okay, well, let me ask Ms. Myers, or we better call, so-and-so real quick. If you're not that person, but you're still in charge of the stuff, it's also kind of like it's a humble pie, situation, which I also didn't love. Yeah. I like that you shared that piece though, because I think too, like in our programs, we can get not stuck like it's a bad thing. If it works, great, do what works. But what you just helped me realize is like, I assumed a lot of programs were structured the way the ones that I worked at were. Not true. There's you can disseminate and you can decide how those responsibilities are shared as a program. And just because it doesn't look even Steven in terms of each person doing a little bit of each type of task, it might alleviate a lot more of the pressure than you realize. It's a really good point.
It's again, it goes back to that. Well, let me backtrack a little bit.
Yeah.
It depends on the department that you're into, like you said. You take a department like Hilmar with 4 people, and they had 4 people that had worked together for I think 20 some years is what Segna had told me.
Wow.
And so that was really cool. But they all kind of knew each other's roles. If they wanted to change something up, they would kind of work it out or whatever. But when a 4-person department with the volume of students that are involved in ag, I mean, there was quite a bit of responsibility on each of those teachers, where some other 4-person departments just don't have as much participation. So there's not as much, if you don't have any kids sign up to show hogs, then you don't have to worry about it, right? So that teacher can focus on just maybe a different SAE or maybe not one at all, right? But I think there's this built-in pressure to perform. And it's like, well, our program's not doing this, but their program is. How's that any different than comparing yourself to another person? Like that program's built completely different. Madera was built way different than Central. And not that anyone was better than the other or worse than the other. I liked things about both. I didn't like things about both, but they were just different programs. They had different types of students. They had different students that were engaged in different things. I think different teachers can kind of influence that, as to what the students are more involved with. Like there was always a thing at Madera was like, so the freshmen would take Ag Mechanics 1. So my coworker Brent did a great job. He taught Ag Mechanics 1 like pretty much all day, and half of his students would typically go to the engine side, and then half his students would go to the fabrication side. And there was a joke. It's like, well, the ones that sucked at welding would go to engines. They didn't really do a whole bunch of engines in Ag Mechanics 1.
Yeah.
But it would go in waves. It was super weird. Like sometimes my classes be overloaded and Tim's classes would be like under, and he'd be trying to get enrollment, and then it would flop. And it's like, what is creating this? Maybe one was giving more energy than the other. I don't know. Or maybe one program, like when I was trying to build up engines, maybe kids are like, hey, this class isn't what I thought it was going to be, so maybe we'll go to the welding side. That's a little more established, which would make sense. But that being said, comparing these programs and trying to put yourself against somebody else, it's completely different. Just focus on what you're good at. And then again, if you can take 2 of those rings and be good at them, the classroom needs to be one of the non-negotiables though.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of just spitting everything out right now. I don't know if
Oh,
there's
I
a
love
I don't know if there's a method to where I'm going, but I've just
it.
got shit in my mind that I need to get out. So
Yeah.
I'm going way back to when you were talking about the classroom.
Yeah.
This is the part I have. This is the issue that I had with some departments, though, that I didn't work in, but that I knew about is you got to coach like 4 teams. Why? Why? Like every student deserves a chance to compete in something. Yeah, every student deserves a chance to be taught in the classroom. All 30 students, 35 students, however many kids you got in your class, they're looking for you to impact their lives.
Yeah.
And you might be the one positive person that day that maybe changes it all for them. Like think about that. This is just total deeper like human personality type shit right now, human psychology.
Yeah.
You might be the person that changes their life. And I know that in the classroom, and because I put such a emphasis on that and focused on that more than anything else, I did help students. I know I helped hundreds of them and their lives. I mean, you think about it, you help them, that helps their family potentially, like that helps them get a job, all of those things. The kids that typically signed up for contests or were doing SAE projects, and I'm not saying all of them, but more often than not, were like higher level students that were just, looking to be involved in something
Probably
else.
they'd be okay regardless.
Yes.
They'd show up to something regardless. Yeah.
Yes. And so, you weren't always going to be able to get some of those kids that were late to class or didn't give a shit about school. You weren't going to get them on your teams. But think about just getting them to your class. Think about teaching them a skill set. Think about impacting their life just in a totally deeper way than you could actually ever even imagine. Like that's the powerful part about ag teaching, and that's what I miss and loved most about being a professional ag teacher. That was the piece that I loved the most was the classroom. I miss that more than anything. Um, looking back on it all.
Yeah. When you talk about it that way, it reminds me of something that's kind of common in our conversations on our coaching team when we're doing team calls and things. At one of our just so funny, just like ag, right? CATA, we have our summer conference. On our coaching team, the company I'm affiliated with, we have like a coach conference every summer in June. And at one of the last conferences I went to, there was just a resounding statement, kind of a theme that kept getting repeated, which was change a mama. You're not just changing her life, like you're changing the entire family, right? Same thing when you think about ag students, like you said, you're not just influencing or impacting the student who's in your classroom, then you're impacting who they become and how they become that person and the steps they take along their journey. And I think when you really start when you accept the fact that on your best days and your worst days that you're having an influence on the way other people see the world and how they experience it and the impact that has, especially on students, you change their life forever. And the mindsets that they carry with them, how they go about making decisions in the future, it's huge. And I think to that end, what if that became more of the focus? What if we talked about classroom in a different way where, not saying set standards aside, like standards are important. We need to be able to prove to all the bigwig people that like, we know what we're doing. We're hitting the targets. Right. But I think it's more about reaching that individual. And when you've got 25, 30, whatever your number is, captive audience every single day, what are you pouring into them? I think that's huge.
I mean, and I think we've brought this up before too, but sometimes in front of that classroom, in that classroom, I mean, there's 100 and Madera had pretty large class sizes because there was just a lot of fucking kids at that school. There's like 3,500, I think, my second year, which was insane. Um, anyways, 30 students in a class was normal, and you're talking about shop classes where these kids are in groups in the shop, groups of 3 or 4. Which was difficult at times, but um, you have so many students in a classroom, and they're some of them are looking at you as a dad, an uncle, a mentor, just somebody who gives a shit about them. And I would always have that same conversation day one. I wouldn't go over the syllabus. We would just talk about what the expectation for the class was going to be, and then maybe do like an introduction sheet, like, tell me about yourself kind of thing. And most of the time that was kind of awkward anyways. It didn't really work the way I wanted it to. But the thing I would explain was, this here is a family. Like, I don't give a shit how bad your day's going. If your girlfriend broke up with you, you know, life
Yeah.
maybe got really shitty at home, something happened. When you come to this classroom, this is a safe space for you. This is a positive place for you. I care about you. I want you to do well. And if you're not going to do good for yourself, good for me, because I actually do give a shit. And the most crazy part, and I think every person who's taught for at least 3 years can relate to this, it's students that you don't think you're making an impact with, that you find out later are like, hey, Mr. Withers, they find you on social media or send you a letter. Hey, Mr. Withers, I really appreciated your class. I know I didn't talk much, or I know I was kind of an ass, but I really learned a lot from you. And I knew you cared. Like, I have a fucking binder. I'm patting myself on the back. Actually, it's the binder sitting on my gun safe behind me. My mother put it together for me. It is letters, pictures, just all this shit from students since I was a student teacher till I was done teaching at Madera. And I mean, just page after page of letters. And yeah, I mean, there was requirements of, not requirements, but like some of the teachers would have them write a letter to their favorite teacher or what have you,
Yeah.
right?
And do your assignment or something.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
have fucking hundreds of these things. And just to know, like, the impact that I did make. And then even a year plus at the college level, I still have students that reach out to me that want to stay in touch. Hey, Corey, here's how I'm doing, man. Just I see you on here. It's really good to, know you're doing well. I see your little baby. Like, that is the fucking impact that the classroom piece makes.
Yep.
Like, it is so important to focus and double down on that. Like, I understand if you have fun going to fairs. I understand if you have fun doing record books, but your classroom is the opportunity to engage so many lives, and not just your students' lives, but their families' lives, their kids' lives someday. It's that was so important to me, and I really found it frustrating that some people didn't understand that, and just trying to articulate why is
Mhm.
like, if that doesn't make sense to you, I don't think anything will.
Well, and I don't want to, what I'm about to say next might need to be an episode in and of itself. But so take like the mic drop moment that you just had right there, talking about the classroom and how important really showing up and engaging and being present in your role as the educator is in that setting. Tell me why then do we hold on a pedestal so freaking much, judge each other for, and recognize programs pretty significantly based on silver bowls and how their kids do at fair? And I'm very competitive. I yell at the TV when the Kings are not going to light the beam. Okay. Like, I'm very competitive for myself and for other things that I participate in. I was very competitive when I was an ag teacher. I pushed my teams. I did all the things. I felt the pressure, all the stuff. But why, after what you just said, and thinking about it now from this perspective too, a lot of people, not everybody, a lot of people come into ag teaching because of having had an experience before with at least one person, one ag teacher, could have been more than one, but you have a positive experience with an ag teacher who impacted your life in such a way that you're like, God, I want to recreate that. I want to duplicate that. I want to go do that for my students. You might have had great experiences on an FFA trip with that person. You might have gotten to win an award with that person. The award is not the reason that brought you to the profession. It's the experience. It's the connection with that person. It's the humanity aspect of it, right? but we structure our profession to like put as the holy grail this quantifiable stuff. Like it's cool in the moment. As soon as you win, it's over. Or don't win, but like as soon as the contest is over, like the moment is done. The thing that will last is whether or not you've had an impact. Like, sorry.
No, you're good.
Ooh,
Constant
this one lights me up real freaking bad.
That's the problem though, is it's the validation portion. We're more worried about what our peers think about us than we are, and this is on a personal level or in another profession like you and I are in, right? We are more worried what our peers think about us than what the people that we're actually trying to help or should be helping think about us. Your story is someone else's salvation. Being able to bring on clients as you work with, Colleen, and now I'm starting to work with my business part-time at the moment, but and even being in, working as a management position in the dealership,
Sure.
like if I'm more worried about what everybody else thinks they're about me than my team and
Yeah.
focusing on what they need and how to help them and best serve them so that they can operate at a high level, then I'm doing everything a disservice, including myself. Like nobody gives a fuck about your silver bowl. That's cool. Like there's people that have won a lot of those, and that's great. And I understand that competitive aspect. We've talked about this before.
Yeah.
I am competitive. I want to fucking win. It's because I want to win because I hate losing more than I like winning, which maybe I need to adjust that, but it is what it is for the moment. And these people worried so much about getting the accolades, and now with social media being more prevalent, I mean, it's more of a, hey, look at me, so proud of my team. No, you're proud of yourself, and you should be. If you
Yeah.
coach them there, you should be. But fuck everybody else for a minute. Focus on your team. You did a good job. They did a good job. You're validated in your mind and should be. And now you still have students to get back to that weren't a part of that team, that
Mhm.
don't give a shit about that contest, that
Mhm.
need your help. They need your energy. That's
Mhm.
what you signed up for. So it's time to double down, get back to business, right? That was the hardest part of, you know, and you could go way, 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 way down a rabbit hole, but even a lot of the time that you miss as a teacher, like you're leaving them with a sub, you're leaving them with packets, you're leaving them videos. And I understand some of these are personal development or professional development type things or leadership conferences, but ag teachers miss a lot of time. They
Yep.
really do. And so if you're in a bigger department, being able to divide that and conquer is probably a better strategy, I would say, instead of the same person always going. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I'm going to keep coming back to it. The classroom piece is so important. Those students need you, especially now. They need you.
Mhm. Oh God, yeah. After everything we've all been through in the last, 3 to 4 years, the classroom's changed so much, right? For a while, the classroom didn't even happen inside four walls. The classroom was happening on screens like
Mhm.
this, and then during the comeback, it was, God, it was crazy. I'm still proud of myself. I made it through what a lot of people would assume would be like the hardest part. Um, but yeah, and classrooms still keep changing, and what are but at the end of the day, what students are experiencing in daily life, the challenges they face at home, what they need from us, the truth that you were just speaking, that part never changes. I don't care if you're in person in a classroom, if you're on a Zoom, if you're, at the school farm doing a demonstration. I don't care where classroom is happening. You're always being called to be that best version of yourself, and to bring that humanity piece, to bring the connection, to be that positive source, and I think we do a disservice to all students when we forget the importance of that particular component. um but so looking at the time and what I know during our brains do this morning, we said we wanted to, how we kind of wanted to look at this structure, given what we just chatted about with the 3-ring model, and how we know it serves students in and out of the classroom, right? Stepping outside and applying that structure to our personal lives, what would you say are, I mean, I already know, but can you tell the people that don't know the way you and I think? What are the three rings or the three components of our personal life? What would you say those pieces are? And then if you had to pick one, which one is your classroom?
The three, so if you yourself as a person was
Right.
structured as an ag educator or
Yeah.
an ag education program, so we're stepping outside the box, we're
Stepping
changing
out of the box.
directions, we're gonna
Uh-huh.
fuck you up right now.
Mhm.
So the three ring circle for a person, in my opinion,
Yeah.
and Colleen and I have talked about this, is
I agree.
my mindset, nutrition,
Mhm.
and the fitness piece. Um, are all three equal? I would say no. I would say to bring all three together is a really difficult challenge, but to be really good at two, you're going to be way ahead of most other people if you want to keep it in the competitive realm here. So you talk about, okay, well, which one's more important? Well, to me, the mindset piece is the most important, right? Like I look back on my personal development journey, which started 6, 7 years ago. And for me, it started on the fitness side of things.
Yep.
Getting back into the gym, putting, just exercising my body, trying to get the fat shaved off, right? That was the physical or the fitness piece, which kind of helped me kickstart it. And if you look at that, like you kind of compare these three rings, you can kind of consider that, and I would say this is true for a lot of ag teachers, to FFA. Like, what got you into this ag education realm? Well, as you said earlier, you probably had a good ag teacher at one point, or had a lot of fun, like going to contests or competing in something, or just going to like SLE or ALA or like one of those conferences, or speaking or being a state officer, whatever it was.
Yeah.
That's the FFA portion, right? And so that probably got you interested into it and got this ag education career started for you.
Mhm.
Now, here we are. Now we're in the midst of it. Now you're coming into your own and trying to figure some things out. The most difficult piece, but the next piece, and I think is the most important, is that mindset piece. And that cross references to the ag ed world as classroom.
Yep.
That mindset piece you have to focus on. You have to put good information into your mind. You have to challenge yourself, because your mind is in control of your body. Everything else revolves around
Mhm.
that mindset. And if you can't focus on that, if you can't get that shit straight, you can go to the gym. You can go to the gym all you want. But guess what? It takes some like actual decisions and some discipline to get yourself to the gym, right? So it interrelates with all of those. And then the third one being nutrition, right? That's kind of the SAE piece to me, in terms of, for most people, I'm speaking for myself here, but it's not the funnest part. Nutrition sucks. Eating good food like that actually tastes good is difficult, and that's why people have a hard time getting started there, myself
Uh-huh.
included.
Uh-huh.
Like, I'm so fucking tired of chicken, but you know what? I eat it because I need to. And it's really hard to get engaged in that portion, but once you kind of start working towards that, sometimes it's not as bad as you think, and it helps you see results as a person and your program. So that's my thoughts. Let's hear what you got.
Yeah. No, and I'm giggling with the nutrition piece because so I already told you Georgia went to urgent care last night. She's totally fine, double ear infection, but she was a trooper, and so I promised her, like, we'll go to our favorite frozen yogurt place here in Elk Grove. Is called Tiger Yogurt. It's like mom and pop, family owned. The owner is the cutest, like he's maybe 4'10" on a good day, but he lights up when we come in because he knows our family very well. Long
Mhm.
story short, promised my girls some frozen yogurt for being a trooper at urgent care. So of course I had some. For the most part, I've not eliminated, but very significantly have just cut dairy to a minimum. Um, Definitely had frozen yogurt, definitely put some M&Ms in it, definitely, and I enjoyed it. I'm not shaming myself, but I woke up this morning and the joints in my hand hurts. And it happens every time I have dairy, every time. Yeah, the nutrition piece is a real biatch. But when I first when I restarted my journey, I played sports in high school. In hindsight, I was relatively fit and active in all the things, had very, very poor body image, really poor mindset. And fast forward through adulthood, for me, and I journaled about this recently, fitness had always been like a means to an end, right? I would run because I needed to be fast enough on the court when I played basketball. I needed to be fast enough for the breakaways. I couldn't just be like hoofing behind everybody and then not be back on defense to block all the short girls, you know? Um, when I was in college, super unhealthy. I'm not recommending this. Every time I would break up with my boyfriend, we were on again, off again for like 3.5 years. Okay. Did not learn my lesson. Every time we broke up, I would starve myself, do hours of cardio at the gym. I'd shrink to my skinniest version. And then quote unquote, I'd put on some skinny jeans and a tank top and like, hey, we're back together. Right. Like, look at me. I'm so amazing. When I got engaged, I was shredding for the wedding, right? Then I had 2 babies, one of which like totally demolished my body when she came out. So then it was like mommy bounce back mode. Fitness was always a means to an end, as opposed to a vital component to me, just like being healthy and thriving in life, right? It was always, I'm doing this just to get to this point, instead of, this is just what we do. This is what we do to be healthy. This is what we do to be effective. This is what we do to be successful, whatever, right? So that was a big shift for me, going from just using it for these like specific times. And I think that can relate back to how we function as ag teachers too. Because sometimes you do go through push periods where your sole focus is on one thing and then everything else is like kind of falling to the wayside. When I restarted, and this was a year into COVID, at my lowest point, at home with both the girls, hating life in my skin. When I restarted my journey, fitness was the first part. I got consistent doing a workout every single day. And, some weight came off relatively easily, and then I plateaued, as we all know happens. And then the next piece I started to look at, and this is weird to say it out loud, but the next piece I started to look at was the nutrition. I didn't have a breakthrough right away in terms of like it being really effective and me finding what worked. But then I got really consistent with having just like increasing my protein intake, having a protein shake every day, good stuff in, right? I started putting more good stuff in. Then I saw that my output was starting to improve again. The last piece that I really got a grasp on was mindset. But when I did, everything else exponentially took off, to the point where like, I see pictures, and it's not just the physical part, but I don't recognize myself. And it's because I'm not who I was then. The pounds have changed. Yes. The way that I think today, unrecognizable to how I thought before. And so when you talk about mindset being the equivalent to the classroom as an ag teacher, 1,000,000% yes, because what you think, what you focus on expands. If you're always focused on what you can't do or whatever the problem is, that problem gets bigger because it's all you're going to see. When you start to learn how to, in my opinion, kind of master your mindset a little bit. I can't control the first thought, right? Like, yesterday, Georgia comes home and she's complaining, Mommy, when my foot hits the ground, it makes my ear hurt so bad. And she's like in tears. Check her ear, fire engine red, right? Like that could have been our undoing yesterday. I can't control the fact that like I'm stressed the F out because it's Friday afternoon, 2:00, doctor's office is full, right? Can't control that. What I can control is, okay, no big deal. Mommy's going to call the doctor. We're going to get a referral to urgent care. We'll go to urgent care. You're going to see somebody today. You know what I mean? Like the mindset is everything. It's where you start with that self-mastery. And when you are able to start mastering your mindset and having control over what you allow in and what you repeat to yourself, you start to be able to master your actions, your boundaries with other people. And you just create, like you talk about creating a safe space for students, you need to create that same space for yourself in your life. and letting everybody and anybody have access to you 24/7, always being on call, always answering text messages, always saying yes when you really need to say no. Like that's all part of it to me. Sorry, that was my like brain
No,
brain stew version of, oh my God, mindset is everything. And it doesn't, it could be during your 10-minute commute. You know what I mean? Or giving up one trashy reality TV show, talking to myself.
we
But
all
yeah.
have a vice.
Oh man. Yeah.
No,
What you put
I
in. Yeah.
and that's so true, Colleen. Like, I mean, that mindset again, and I mentioned this earlier, but your body follows your mind. Your mind, Joe Rogan said this, your mind is the general, your body is the soldiers. Your mind tells your body what to do. And so often we convince ourselves that we're tired or that it's going to be too hard or, all those excuses that we've talked about before. And that
Yeah.
everybody knows, what your excuses are. I
Sure.
make them too. But your mind being able to overcome those excuses and overcome that narrative that maybe something isn't for you, you know, then it empowers those other two circles. Those two things can't exist without the mindset piece, in
Mhm.
my opinion, because your mind has to be disciplined enough to get you to do those things, to go to the gym or just, get your fitness and your body in check. And then also the nutrition piece. Well, I mean, let's go back to the ag teaching thing. Ag education isn't a thing if there's no ag teachers. There's no FFA teachers. There's no SAE teachers. There's no swine teachers. Like maybe in college it's a little more that way, but as high school educators, that's the point we're trying to get across here, is that without classroom,
Yeah.
nothing else exists. Without mindset, nothing else can exist. So as you make that decision to discipline yourself and be able to make positive and good decisions and put good thoughts and good information into your head, whether it's through gratitude, through prayer, through reading, through listening to YouTube, like just kind of positive, motivating information, whatever that looks like for you. And it could be a combination of all of that stuff. I've tried it all. These are things that I do, and I'm sure a lot of that cross aligns with you. But once you can decide and get your mind and take control of it, it's that drifting thing we talked about last week or a couple weeks ago. When your mind starts to drift, scrolling through social media, those type of things, again, guilty, super guilty. Or watching reality TV shows, not as guilty as you, I imagine, but I do have my own shows that I like. Anyways,
Yeah.
the point is that drifting,
Mhm.
being able to have a definiteness of purpose, that goes back to that book that we talked about, the Outwitting the Devil. That is the strongest skill you can have, definiteness of purpose. And no, this is who I am. You didn't become an ag teacher to fuck up students lives. You became an ag teacher to help students, to be
Yeah.
a part of something so much bigger. Like, that is true for everybody. If there's one thing in common, that is fucking true. And so, you know, that definiteness of purpose, think of the ability you have to influence people. That's what you do when you stand up in front of a classroom. You're making a positive adjustment in their lives and helping them. The same for yourself, right? It's getting to your mind what you want to do and doing it at a high level. And that's that mindset piece for me. That's what it means. And the other two cannot exist without it.
Yep. No, I that's why when I do this, that's just me physically like, oh my God, epiphany. Yeah, right there. And then you said it like that is it right there. You just watched me have that epiphany moment of, oh, like, oh my God, SAE and FFA don't happen if the classroom's not there. If you don't have kids enrolling into your ag program via some type of ag class, they don't even have the ability to get connected to those other two pieces, right? Like you can't enroll in FFA without being an ag ed student. It just is what it is, at least here in California. Yeah, man, that is so good. Um, So I want to just tie up loose ends, kind of wrap this with a bow, give people some actionable steps as they head out into this week. To recap a couple things, and then I'll see if each of us want to give like a, final woohoo statement. But so far today, we've been talking about kind of this parallel between ag education and who we are and how we show up, hopefully as our best self, individually, right? So 3-ring model in ag education, classroom, FFA, and SAE. If we take that same structure and apply it to the person, Coach Cory and I are telling you it's mindset, fitness, and nutrition. And the number one takeaway, if you start, right, if you're looking at starting or restarting your personal development journey, please, for the love of God and all that's holy, start with mindset. I mean, wherever your inspiration comes from, maybe it's moving your body for 30 minutes today. So you're going to go on a walk with the dog or go to the gym. Great. But let your real first focus be on your mindset, because like the classroom in ag education, mindset is the be all end all, right? It's where everything else is going to spur from. So if you can master your mindset, you can master literally anything else in your life. So some action steps for this week might be identifying where you have distractions right now from that lived purpose that Cory's talking about, right? Like us as ag teachers, we come into this thing because we want to have an impact on students. Sometimes we get so distracted by the bells and whistles and all the other ish happening in the profession, listening to other people's opinions, right? The opinions other people have about us is none of our business, and the opinions we have about them and their program are definitely none of their business, right? But we get distracted by it because it's how we judge and weigh ourselves against each other. Identify distractions in your life. Pick one to cut out. For me, it would be just any Real Housewives. I watched them all. I could cut out one city and I would still have 6 that I could enjoy, okay? But find one distraction that you can cut out, and then identify one positive input that you could bring in, right? And I love that you mentioned that, Cory, because we are in charge of what we put into our minds. We're in charge of what we watch, what we listen to. So choose one. My takeaway or my action would be choose one distraction to get rid of and replace it with one positive. What final thoughts do you have, sir?
Just going back to that, and I'm gonna beat this fucking horse to death, but
Eat it.
the classroom is your sanctuary that you can create a positive, special environment for your students. And you and I both know as well as anybody, the students is they're why we do this. They're why anybody does this. I wanted to have an impact on people's lives. When I leave this earth, nobody's gonna give a fucking shit about it after 4 days, right? They mourn and then it's gone. But what impact, if you're trying to leave a legacy, or if you're really trying to live a purposeful life, that's act of service that you all have signed up to do through this profession, is to give back to those people who need you the most. It's okay to have fun. It's okay to engage in these other circles and be hardcore about one or another. I totally get that, right? Like for me, if in the personal side of things, mindset, obviously the most important, not the most fun.
Yeah,
Like
usually the
I
hardest.
like work, I like the exercise portion the most. Eating fucking like healthy food, that's not fun to me. I hate that. But you know what? I do it because it's making me better. It's helping me bring those three rings together as best as possible and be as effective as possible. So my call to action this week is, and it kind of aligns with what you're talking about. 2 things. Number 1, do a reflection on where you're at with your students in the classroom, and ask yourself if you're being a teacher. And if you're not, figure out a game plan of what that looks like and how to get back to that. And even though we're not teachers anymore, Colleen and I would be very glad to help you dissect what that looks like and come up with a game plan to get back into it. Second of all, and this is the one that aligns more with yours, pick something to do, whether it's listening to motivational podcasts, whether it's reading a personal development book, not self-help, we call it personal development, so it doesn't sound as bad. Um, just doing a power list, whatever that looks like. Meditating, that's actually something I've been doing. I haven't done it every day in the last 2 weeks, but I'm doing it. And it's really hard for me to quiet my mind. And I know it's going to help benefit me and help with that mindset piece, right? And bring everything together. So pick something that you can do and just commit to it. Even if you don't do it every day, do it most days this week and see how you feel after you do it. Give it a month. Give it 2 months. Don't quit on yourself and see where you end up. That was a very long, by the way, final thoughts, but I got a lot on my mind today, so I'm just fucking word vomit.
It was a spicy stew is what it was. Okay. Like we're bringing the heat. Friends, you know what to do. Well, and if you don't, we're going to tell you what to do. Number one, if you appreciate this episode, this content, please, like this episode, share it with somebody that would appreciate this message. And, the more subscribers we get, the more we know we're going in the right direction. So if you want to have a say so on the kind of things that we talk about here, then take the action, like, comment, subscribe, share it with somebody that you know that needs this message. And we'll see you next time. Thanks, guys.